Have you ever been through moments when everything seems lost and the only thing left is faith? What if I told you that this same faith could be the key to the miracle you've been waiting for? In this video, we'll learn about the incredible power of faith and how God answers when we cry out with confidence. Miracles aren't just distant stories. They can happen in your life right now. And what's even more fascinating, the path to this is within your reach. Imagine seeing that prayer, which you prayed in tears, being answered in a way so powerful that not even words can explain it. Yes, God can do this for you. When genuine faith meets the right moment, the supernatural happens. I'll show you how, throughout your life, you can begin to perceive divine answers, how they manifest themselves, and how you can experience the miracle that seems so far away today. If you want to discover how your faith can unlock answers that you may not even imagine, then this video is for you. Don't miss the opportunity to understand how the cry that comes from the depths of your heart can touch the heart of God. The miracle you've been waiting for may be closer than you think. Are you ready to see your faith turn into a miracle? So, let's get started. True faith is when a person places their complete trust in God, even without seeing tangible proof at the moment. It is the certainty that He is in control, regardless of what your eyes see or your mind understands. This type of faith is the foundation that paves the way for the supernatural, creating the perfect conditions for miracles to happen. Just like a seed planted in fertile soil, faith grows and produces invisible but powerful fruits. Those who walk with true faith know that God is faithful, even if everything around them seems uncertain. The concept of faith goes beyond just believing in something abstract. It is a lifestyle. Imagine someone who crosses a desert with no water in sight, but still believes that there will be an oasis just ahead. This trust is what moves God's hands in situations where circumstances suggest otherwise. The Bible shows us that figures like Noah built an ark without ever having seen rain. He believed, and that was enough to change the course of his life and that of his family. True faith becomes a firm foundation in the midst of life's storms. Many people wonder how to keep believing when everything seems to be going wrong. The answer lies in keeping your eyes fixed on God, not on your circumstances. To practice this in your daily life, you can start by surrendering your daily challenges to Him through simple but trusting prayers. Open your Bible and read stories of faith, such as that of Abraham, who left everything to follow a divine promise. This practice will strengthen your trust in God and open the doors to miracles. Crying out to God goes beyond a common prayer. It is a cry from the soul, a fervent request for divine intervention. When a person cries out, they express all their urgency, leaving aside any hesitation. This type of sincere prayer has the power to move God's heart and open doors that previously seemed insurmountable. Imagine someone lost in the middle of a storm, crying out for help. That is the intensity of a cry that God hears and answers. Crying out demonstrates our total dependence on God. In moments of despair, when human strength is not enough, crying out is the attitude that transforms the impossible into the possible. There are countless examples in the Bible of people who cried out and saw miracles happen. A clear example is that of Bartimaeus, the blind man who, upon hearing that Jesus was passing by, cried out in a loud voice asking for mercy. His cry caught the attention of Jesus, who healed him instantly, proving that God answers those who seek Him sincerely. In our daily lives, crying out can be something as simple as an urgent request in prayer, but it can also be a moment of deep surrender and devotion. When doors seem closed and answers do not come, crying out to God is a way of completely surrendering your situation into His hands. Try crying out in moments of affliction, bending your knees and letting each word be filled with faith and trust. Often, it is in this place of surrender that divine answers begin to emerge. Testimonies of miracles are powerful proof of how faith can transform impossible situations into surprising realities. When we hear stories of people who, in the midst of despair, decided to trust God completely, we are inspired to do the same. One striking example is that of a woman who prayed for years for her husband to find faith. She persevered in prayer, even when everything seemed to indicate otherwise, until one day he surrendered himself to God in an unexpected way, transforming not only his life, but that of the entire family. These stories of faith are not mere distant tales, but events that can be repeated in anyone's life. The Bible is full of examples of how persistent faith generates miracles. One of the best known is that of Moses, who, trusting in God's promises, led the people of Israel through the Red Sea, where the impossible became reality before everyone's eyes. What seemed like the end became the greatest miracle of the people's deliverance. Today, many face challenges and wonder if God still performs miracles. The answer lies in the power of faith and persevering prayer. The practice of seeking God with confidence, even without seeing immediate signs, is what opens the doors to the supernatural. Just as ordinary people have seen illnesses healed, families restored, and provisions made in times of crisis, each of us can experience the divine touch by believing that the impossible is in God's hands. Prayer is the channel through which faith manifests itself, and together they become the key to the impossible. When someone approaches God in prayer with a heart full of trust, a direct connection with the supernatural is created. God moves in response to the fervent prayer and unwavering faith of His children. When the human mind reaches its limit, that is when prayer combined with faith opens doors that no one else could open. Fervent prayer, the kind that comes from the depths of the heart, has the ability to transform seemingly unchangeable scenarios. Just as a farmer plants seeds and trusts in the harvest, a person who prays in faith does not need to see immediate results to believe that the answer will come. The Bible reminds us that Elijah, even in the face of a devastating drought, prayed in faith and saw the rain return. The miracle was not just the water that fell, but the demonstration of God's power in response to His servant's trust. In our daily lives, it is essential that prayer be a constant practice, not only in times of difficulty, but as part of a life of faith. When you pray in faith, you are declaring that you trust God more than your circumstances. Set aside time each day to pray, even for a few minutes, and create an environment of faith around you. You will see how God begins to respond, not only to your cries, but also to needs that you did not even know you had. Faith is not a sprint, but a marathon that requires persistence. When someone maintains their faith steadfast, even in the face of obstacles and apparent delays, they attract divine answers. The parable of the persistent widow in Luke 18:1-8 exemplifies this principle well. She continued to seek justice despite initial refusals, and her perseverance was rewarded. Likewise, God honors those who do not give up, who pray without ceasing and continue to trust, even when time seems long. Persistence in faith reminds us that God hears every cry, even if the answers do not come at the time we expect. Many times, God's silence does not mean that He is not acting, but rather that the perfect time is yet to come. Think of Joseph, who waited years for his visions to be fulfilled. He maintained his faith, even in the midst of betrayal and injustice, and in the end, he saw the miracle happen in his life. Persistence, even when everything seems contrary, is what leads us to experience surprising answers. In everyday life, this perseverance can be practiced in simple situations, such as seeking a cure, restoring a relationship, or even making a financial change. When answers don't come, it's common to feel discouraged, but it's precisely at this moment that faith needs to be renewed. Keep praying and believing, even if circumstances don't change immediately. Persistence is the way to see the supernatural happen, and God always answers those who persevere. God hears every prayer, every sincere cry that comes from a heart full of faith, but His answers come at the perfect time, which only He knows. Sometimes the wait may seem long and difficult, but it's in this process that our trust in God is strengthened. When we give our concerns to Him, we need to remember that He sees beyond what we can see. He knows the exact moment when His answer will have the greatest impact on our lives, and that's why trusting in His divine calendar is essential. When we look at Scripture, we see many examples of how God answers in His timing. Think of Abraham, who waited years to see the fulfillment of his promise to have a son. Although the wait was long, Abraham's faith was not in vain. At the right time, God fulfilled His promise. The same is true in our lives. Waiting is part of God's plan, and the patience we develop during this time is a way for Him to prepare us for the blessing that is to come. In our daily lives, we can practice this trust by taking one day at a time, giving our concerns to God, and trusting that He knows what is best for us. When anxiety and doubt creep in, remember that God is never late. He is working out His plans in ways we may not understand at the moment, but in the end, His answers will always be perfect. As we wait, keep faith, pray, and believe that God's answer is coming in His timing. It is in the moments of greatest despair that faith reveals its true strength. When everything seems to be falling apart, when human responses fail and doors close, it is faith that keeps us standing. The Bible shows us several examples of people who, in their despair, cried out to God and saw miracles happen. One of the most touching examples is that of Jairus, who, faced with his daughter's deathly illness, sought Jesus with the faith that only he could do something. Even when everyone said it was too late, Jairus kept his faith, and Jesus brought his daughter back to life. Despair is often a turning point, where faith is refined and strengthened. When we are at rock bottom, that is when total dependence on God becomes evident. In situations like these, faith is not an option, but the only way out. The story of Hannah, who cried out to God for a child, also teaches us that sincere and faith-filled cries, even in the midst of pain and anguish, move the heart of God. Her despair turned into a miracle that impacted not only her life, but the entire nation of Israel. In everyday life, these moments of despair can arise in many ways: financial problems, health crises, or emotional losses. In these moments, instead of allowing yourself to be overcome by anguish, the practice of prayer and trust in God can change your entire perspective. Placing your despair in God's hands and believing that He can transform any situation is the first step to experiencing a miracle. God works with power, especially in situations where everything seems lost. Faith is the main means by which we connect directly with God. It allows us to see beyond human limitations and access the spiritual dimension where God works. When a person places their trust in God, they are opening a direct line of communication with the Creator. Faith not only brings us closer to God, but also creates the necessary environment for Him to act in our lives. It is through faith that we hear His voice, feel His presence, and see His answers manifest. The Bible shows us that faith was the channel through which many experienced God's action. An example of this is the woman with the issue of blood, who upon touching the hem of Jesus' garment was instantly healed. She had no other recourse, but her faith connected her to the power of God, and the miracle happened. In the same way, our faith connects us to the supernatural. It allows us to experience divine intervention, whether through a healing, a peaceful answer in the midst of a storm, or an unexpected provision. In our daily lives, this connection with God can be strengthened in many ways. Regularly reading the Bible, for example, is a way to nourish our faith and keep our communication with God alive. Another way is through sincere prayer and praise. Whenever we seek God with faith, we are allowing Him to enter our hearts and guide our steps. This daily practice keeps us connected to the Lord and open to seeing His answers in every area of our lives. In Mark 11:24, Jesus teaches us about the power of faith when He says that if anyone believes, he can command a mountain to move, and it will move. This passage is about more than just physical mountains. It refers to the impossible obstacles we face in our lives. Jesus shows us that with genuine faith, there is no obstacle too great to overcome. The mountains represent those problems that seem insurmountable, but can be removed by faith in action. When Jesus spoke these words, He was teaching that faith has the power to make the impossible possible. Think of a situation in your life that seems like a real challenge, perhaps a financial hardship, a health problem, or a family crisis. Through faith, you can see these mountains being moved. It's a matter of believing that God is in control and that even if circumstances say otherwise, He can change the course of your story. Faith not only gives us hope, but it also puts us in a position to see miracles. In practice, moving mountains begins with small acts of trust in God. When you find yourself in a difficult situation, remember to put your faith into action by praying and believing that God will answer. Change may not happen immediately, but continued faith is what brings divine answers. Persevere in declaring God's word over your life and your difficulties, and you will see over time how even the largest mountains can be moved. When circumstances become impossible and everything seems lost, it is trust in God that gives us the strength to move forward. Faith allows us to see beyond the chaos and believe that even in the most difficult situations, God has a plan. Many examples in the Bible show people who, even when everything seemed to point to defeat, maintained their trust in the Lord, and through this faith, experienced miracles. Job, for example, lost everything, but continued to trust in God, and in the end he was restored with twice what he had before. Trust in God when the situation is one of total despair gives us a peace that goes beyond human understanding. When everything falls apart around us, it is natural to feel disoriented, but it is at these times that we must remember that God is faithful. He sees what we do not see and is working on our behalf, even if we do not realize it. Imagine someone who is in a dark tunnel, unable to see the way out, but confident that if they keep walking, the light will appear. This trust is the essence of faith. In everyday life, this trust can be practiced by giving your concerns to God in prayer and trusting that He is in control. When a door closes, instead of despairing, see it as an opportunity for God to open something greater. In difficult times, remember biblical stories like that of David, who trusted God against all odds when facing Goliath. When all seems lost, it is trust in God that ignites hope that the best is yet to come. True faith is not just a matter of believing, but also of taking action. Action and obedience go hand in hand with faith, showing that we trust God to the point of following His guidance, even when we do not understand everything. A clear example of this is the story of Abraham, who, in obedience to God, left his land and went to a place he did not know, trusting in God's promises. His faith was not just in the realm of words, but was manifested through actions that changed his life and the future of his descendants. This same obedience can be applied to our daily lives. Sometimes God asks us to take a step of faith, such as forgiving someone, making a difficult decision, or trusting Him in a specific area. When we obey, we are demonstrating that our faith is genuine and active. Think of a farmer who plants seeds without knowing for sure when the harvest will come. He acts based on the confidence that the fruits will come in due time. This is faith that expresses itself in actions. Active faith requires that we put into practice what we believe. It is not enough to pray for something and not act according to God's guidance. For example, if you are praying for a job opportunity, practical faith involves searching for vacancies, sending out resumes, and preparing for interviews, knowing that God is in the lead. Likewise, if you desire restoration in a relationship, obey God's call to have attitudes of love and reconciliation. Faith that acts is the faith that brings results. Spiritual battles are a reality in everyone's life, and it is faith that enables us to overcome them. In the midst of these often invisible challenges, trusting in God is what strengthens us to face what is beyond our natural capabilities. The Bible reminds us that our fight is not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces. Faith is like a shield, protecting us from the attacks that come to discourage us, make us give up, or distance us from the purpose that God has for us. Faith in spiritual battles manifests itself when we choose to believe in God's promises, even when the world around us tells us otherwise. A striking biblical example is that of Jehoshaphat, who, faced with a much larger army, trusted God completely and saw the enemy defeated without him having to raise a weapon. In situations of spiritual conflict, faith becomes the most powerful weapon we can use. It keeps us firm, even when circumstances seem impossible. In our daily lives, spiritual battles can appear in the form of internal conflicts, emotional challenges, or even external pressures that try to steal our peace. In these times, faith is what keeps us standing. To face these battles, it is important to strengthen your faith through prayer, reading the Bible, and communion with God. Declare God's promises over your life and trust that, with faith, you can overcome any challenge. God fights for those who maintain their trust in Him. When we talk about miracles, we often think of physical healings or visible transformations, but God works in much deeper areas, bringing emotional and spiritual miracles. Faith not only opens doors for God to heal a sick body, but also restores broken hearts and renews afflicted minds. There are times when the greatest miracle we can experience is peace in the midst of a storm, the strength to forgive, or the healing of an emotional wound that prevents us from moving forward. These emotional and spiritual miracles are just as powerful as physical miracles. Jesus not only healed bodies but also restored souls, bringing relief to those who were burdened. An example of this is the man possessed by spirits, who lived isolated and suffering until the moment he met Jesus. The transformation in his life was total, not only physical, but spiritual and emotional. This type of miracle happens every day, when a person finds freedom from anxieties, fears, and pains from the past in God. In our daily lives, we all face internal battles that often only God knows. Faith allows us to surrender these areas to Him and trust that He can restore our emotional and spiritual health. If you are seeking inner change, practicing prayer, reading the Psalms, and meditating on the peace that Jesus offers are powerful ways to strengthen your faith. The healing that God offers goes far beyond the physical. He desires to transform every part of our being, bringing a peace that surpasses all understanding. Strengthening faith is an ongoing process that requires practice and dedication, but it is essential for those who desire to see miracles in their lives. Faith is not something static. It needs to be nurtured and exercised daily. One of the most effective ways to strengthen faith is through constant reading of God's Word. The Bible is full of promises that reinforce our trust in God's power. Starting your day by reading a psalm or a passage from the Gospel, for example, can renew your mind and fill your heart with hope. Another key element in strengthening faith is constant prayer. Praying regularly keeps us connected to God and helps us focus on His promises rather than our difficulties. Prayer doesn't have to be long, but it should be sincere and full of trust. Even in moments of doubt, keep praying and giving your concerns to God. Perseverance in prayer causes faith to grow, like a plant that is watered daily until it blooms. The more you pray, the more you feel God's presence and notice His answers. In addition, hearing testimonies from others who have experienced miracles is also a powerful way to strengthen your faith. Knowing that God has worked in the lives of others inspires us to believe that He can do the same for us. Try reading books or listening to podcasts that share stories of miracles. When you engage in a community of faith and feed on these experiences, your faith becomes stronger and you become more open to seeing the supernatural happen in your own life. Now that you have learned the transformative power of faith, the big question is, how will you apply it to your life? Are you ready to put into practice everything we've talked about and experience the miracles God has in store for you? Faith that cries out, that perseveres, and that trusts even when everything seems lost is the key to seeing the impossible become possible. So what are you waiting for to start taking action? God is already listening to your cry, and now it's your turn to take a step of trust. When was the last time you cried out to Him with all your heart? Maybe it's time to renew your prayer, to trust a little more, to believe that the supernatural can happen in your life today. Try strengthening your faith with the tips we've shared and see what God can do. If you want to continue learning more about faith, miracles, and how to walk in trust in God, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Don't miss any of the upcoming messages that can help you experience the transformation you so desire. God has much more to do in your life, and faith is the beginning of this new life.